Well, let's start with what it adds up to. I think we have to see the big society and the public spending cuts as two sides of the same coin. In a way, the story of the big society makes the spending cuts politically possible. But if the cuts are implemented as planned, they will probably make some of the best ideals behind the big society story impossible to realise. So you've got this contradiction in there already. But what you've got is a wholesale shift of responsibility and possibly liability away from the state towards individuals and families, and away from public sector organisations to self-help, mutual aid, philanthropy, charity, local enterprise and big business. And this amounts to the beginning of the beginning of the end of the post-war settlement, and the beginning of a new settlement, a new welfare settlement, if you like. And then there are big questions about what that settlement is, what it amounts to, and what it can become. Now, the theme tonight is inequality, and I think we need to think about at least three kinds of inequality that are inherent in this new settlement and that we need to address. And the first kind of inequality is one that has been referred to. It's about, is the big society big enough for everybody? Can everybody participate and benefit? And I've in the work that we've done, identified three different ways in which you can lose out. First of all, not everyone has the same capacity to participate. Depends on your income, where you live, who you know, how you feel about yourself, who your neighbours are, and many other things like that. So we don't all have the same capacity. And then there's the question of access to the organisations that will be doing the stuff. And all these organisations in the independent sectors have boundaries. No reason why they shouldn't, but these boundaries that are determined variously by things like kinship and ethnicity and geography and status and class and all sorts of other things, exclude some people and include others. So it's very important that we recognise that civil society isn't in itself an inclusive place or an inclusive combination of places. So access is important. And then the third dimension of this kind of inequality is time. If you're going to participate as a citizen, you need time. And of course we've all got the same number of hours in the day, but we don't all have the same amount of control over our time. Some people have lots more discretionary time than others. So how much time you have, and if you're a busy parent with a low-paid job, having to work long hours to get enough money, and you've got big family responsibilities, how are you going to find time to participate in the big society, let alone benefit from it? So that's those three things are about about citizens. Do we all have is the big society equal for citizens? And I think there's lots of questions there. The second type of inequality is inequality between civil society and big business. Now, some people, perhaps in some kinds of analysis, would include big corporate organisations in the definition of civil society, but I would want to make a distinction between voluntary organisations and small enterprises and the big corporates. And voluntary organisations, and this has been alluded to, are being massively seduced by government into thinking that they are going to be the ones who will do the big society. And let's hope that that's how it happens. But in moving out and taking over, filling the gaps left by a retreating state, it's going to take time, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be a struggle. Many of them have had their grants cut. And what about those small organisations? And meanwhile, who's out there limbering up? But the big corporates who know how to snaffle the big contracts and how to provide services in volume. And so we've got, United Health and Serco and Capita and Deloitte's and Pricewaterhouse, and they're going to be moving in and playing a much bigger role in providing what used to be known as the welfare state than they have before. So there's that kind of inequality as well. And the third kind of inequality is the inequality that we have already in the way that public services are delivered between the provider and the user. So we have a model of delivery where you have the all-powerful, all-knowing provider who provides to things or does things to or for the powerless, passive and hopefully grateful service user. So that's another kind of inequality. Inequality between citizens, inequality between the civil society and big business, and inequality between provider and user. And so this throws up some important challenges, and there are challenges there for the state, and you've already referred to this. This is all a big question about what the future role of the state is going to be in a way. And I mean, there's a lot to say here, so I will just be very, very quick and say I think the state, the government on our behalf, our democratically elected government, needs to be the champion, the holder and the champion of the goals that are behind the big society, that are the ends and not the means. I mean, devolving power is a kind of means, but why? What are we trying to achieve here? But supposing we said that the goals of the big society, or the goals of the new settlement, new social settlement, were social justice and well-being for all. I mean, maybe it'll be something different, but we should have some explicit goals here that we all agree and that the state pursues and champions on our behalf. Then the state needs to be responsible for ensuring that everyone can participate on an equal basis. Now that's a very big ask, but we have to do our very best. Somebody talked about, reaching out to make sure that people who are sometimes called hard to reach or seldom heard, or the most disadvantaged and most marginalised people can actually get in and participate and benefit on an equal footing with everyone else, and that's a very complicated business, but it needs to be done. And I think that needs to be, not necessarily to do that, but to be responsible for ensuring that it is done, is the role of the state. And I think we need to think seriously about shifting to a shorter working week. This is another argument which I won't go into tonight, but I think it's a very important one. Has all sorts of benefits there, spreading paid and unpaid work more evenly across the population, so that everyone's got a chance to earn a living and everyone's got a chance to be active citizens and carers and do the valuable unpaid work. So that's some of the things that the state needs to do, also to have clear lines of accountability, because where does the buck stop with any of this? Who's really, I mean, even with the shift of budgets to direct budget holders, is that a shift of liability from the state to the individual? If you're given a budget to spend on your behalf, is the state no longer responsible for what happens to you? And there's this big shift so we need to have clear lines of accountability. Then, for providers, this one thing that I would ask in the short term I've got is that we do introduce co-production as the standard way of getting things done. The principles of co-production, which are about equal and reciprocal partnerships between people who would otherwise be called providers and users of services, joining together with family members and neighbours and carers, or in whatever's appropriate, to pool different kinds of knowledge and skill, and to work together to define what needs to be done, to plan how it can be done, and then to deliver it. And that's a model that would transform the public sector as we know it and the services that we're used to, and could really make a transformative difference in the development of this new social settlement.